Now, ratings agency Moodys has downgraded South Africa's outlook to negative. Joining me now to discuss that particular issue is Devin Morrigan, back in the studio there. So, Devin, we've been downgraded to negative, but not quite junk status. What can we read into that?
Yes, good morning, Dan. Yeah, the fact that we've not been downgraded in our actual credit rating by Moody's, that means going into the junk sphere or junk realm, it doesn't make the deal any sweeter. Our outlook has changed, and what does that mean? Well, it means that the last remaining rating agency for South Africa, keeping it on investment grade, is telling us that you are really on the cusp. It's the last move before actually putting you into junk status. We are saying that the outlook going forward is negative. Now, Dan, it was expected. When you read through that Moody statement, it says that government doesn't seem to have what it calls the political capital to implement some of its growth reforms. You understand that growth by far was one of the most important aspects of this credit rating decision. If an economy cannot grow or doesn't have the potential to grow, it doesn't generate taxes, its fiscus becomes really, really, really weak. And the debt was the other massive issue. So basically, in a nutshell, what Moodys is saying is that we don't think you guys can actually get together, muster up the political capital to go ahead and implement reforms. And if that doesn't happen, I'm afraid your fiscus is in big trouble. So we're giving you an outlook now to tell you that the next move we do could very well be a move into junk.
Now, Devin, it's obviously the same old issues. We're talking about Eskom, we're talking about debt. Is Moody's looking at South Africa now and thinking it's all getting worse?
Well, indeed. I mean, and they point out exactly those issues in their statement. I mean, Eskom, for example, I don't think they minced their words there. We all expected it. We are throwing money at this power utility, and that's one of the reasons why we are borrowing so much. We're borrowing money not to invest into capital so that we can get this economy starting. We are borrowing money and using that money for consumption-led activity and bailing out state-owned enterprises. And if you look at that activity of bailing out these state-owned enterprises like Eskom, what Moodys is saying is that that's where you were using your money, and the fiscus is beginning to get weaker and weaker. And then what happens when you borrow? Your debt to GDP ratio increases. In fact, the midterm budget, which is the basis of the statement, by the way, says that in the next 3 years, our debt to GDP ratio will hit 70% or exceed 70%. Now, anything above 60% of a debt to GDP ratio for any country is where you start to begin to worry. Not so much in countries like America, for example, where you do know that the growth potential is there. But in South Africa, when your economy is seen to only grow at 0.5%, that's basically no move at all. And you have a debt that's approaching 70% to GDP. Some eyebrows are going to be raised here. And again, Moody's saying that, look, we'll give you guys 12 to 18 months. That's the next time they can move. They can move any time in between that period. And I'm afraid the next budget is a few months away. I'm not quite sure that South Africa can convincingly get together and say, look, we're changing the trajectory. So there's a bit of an uphill battle for this country.
You're beginning to worry me there, Devin. Treasury has responded, of course, saying that they need to speed up those reforms. Can this be done, and what should they do?
Yeah, well, as I said just in my last answer there, I mean, you've got until the February budget. It's not likely that you can reflect something in that budget that would be astonishingly positive. That doesn't mean that Moody's would react immediately after that budget. As I said, the next move that they make will have to be working on that outlook. In other words, they could, and very likely, actually downgrade in the next move. But they only make their next move, or compelled to make it, between 12 to 18 months. They need not say a thing before that. So Treasury is saying they are aware of this. There's what they call a window period, a very narrow window period for it to be convincing that it can get its act together. What happens if we do get it downgraded in the next few months, Tony? And I think this is important. So the rand will start tanking, and if the rand tanks, the rand will tank, by the way, as a result of investors fleeing some of our bonds. Legally, they will be compelled, if Moody's downgrades us to junk, they will be compelled to leave the country's bonds. About 200 billion rand, up to that amount, could leave the country. The rand then weakens, inflation goes up, interest rates for you and I start rising. It becomes more difficult to actually pay a bond off, more difficult to pay a car off, for example. Things get tighter. And the Treasury is aware of this. I mean, make no mistakes. The thing is, at the end of the day, if you don't have the political capital to sit down, as Moodys points out, and get all your economic stakeholders, business, labour, and so forth, to actually, and government, to actually say, these are the growth reforms we will implement, and this is the evidence that we will do it very soon, I'm afraid then you might be in big trouble. But let's see. We're not in junkers yet. It's just the outlook that changed. But we've got very limited time to act on it.
All right, thank you so much, Devin Murray.